You are 17 years old and you already understand something that most people your age don't. You understand that the neighborhood has a structure and the structure has rules and the rules are enforced by specific men in specific ways. And those men are respected in a manner that your teachers and your father and the local city councilman are not. You understand this not because anyone explained it to you, because you grew up inside it the way fish grow up inside water, without needing to name it or question it, just moving through it every day as the basic condition of existence. The men on the corner near the social club on Mulberry Street, the ones who are never in a hurry and always have money, the ones your mother tells you to avoid while your uncle nods to them with something that isn't quite deference, but is adjacent to it. You've been watching them your whole life. You know what they are. The question you're 17 and starting to ask is whether you could be that. If that question sounds familiar to you, FNB Dude, POV is where it gets answered honestly. The structure you're looking at has a name. In the American context, it's called La Cosa Nostra, which translates roughly to this thing of ours, which is either poetic or deliberately vague depending on how you look at it. The 5 families of New York, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Colombo, Bonanno, each control specific territories and specific industries and operate under a hierarchy that has remained largely unchanged since the late 1930s when Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky reorganized what had been a collection of warring factions into something that functioned more like a corporation. At the top is the boss, the capo di tutti capi in the old phrasing, though no one has officially held that title since Luciano because officially holding it makes you a very specific kind of target. Below him is the underboss and the consigliere, the advisor, who is often the most important person in the room precisely because he has no official power and therefore no official exposure. Below that are the capos, each running a crew of 10 to 20 men. And below the capos are the soldiers, the made men, the wise guys, the specific category of person that you are, at 17, beginning to understand you want to become. But you can't become it yet, not officially. To be made, to be formally inducted into a family, you have to be of full Italian descent, both parents in the traditional requirement, and you have to have killed for the family, and you have to be sponsored by a made man who will vouch for you with his own life, literally, because if you turn out to be an informant or a federal agent, your sponsor answers for it personally. The ritual itself is conducted in a room with a gun and a knife and a burning image of a saint and an oath that you are told has no exit. Once you're in, someone will eventually tell you. You're in until you're dead or until you're in prison, and prison just means you wait. You are 17. This sounds like permanence, which at 17 sounds like belonging. You start as what they call an associate, not a member, not protected by the rules that govern how members treat each other. An associate is someone the family uses before it decides whether to trust, and being used before you're trusted means you do the work that carries the risk while the men above you carry the revenue. You run errands, you drive, you deliver things in bags without asking what's in the bags, which is not incuriosity but wisdom. Because what you don't know can't be extracted from you, and because the bag is not your business, and your business is to be reliable. You show up when you're called. You don't ask questions about what you're not involved in. You keep your mouth closed in the presence of people you haven't been introduced to, because in this world, the social introduction carries legal weight. If someone introduces you to a made man, they're vouching for you, and vouching means liability. Your first real assignment is collecting. A restaurant owner on the east side of the neighborhood pays $800 a month for the family's protection, which means for the right to operate without his windows being broken or his suppliers being disrupted or a health inspector being quietly encouraged to find violations that would cost him his license. You go with an older associate named Carmine who has been doing this for 6 years and who walks into the restaurant the way a landlord walks into a property, with ownership that doesn't require documentation. The owner hands Carmine an envelope. Carmine pockets it. They talk for 4 minutes about the Yankees. You stand near the door. On the way out, Carmine says, "See, nobody's getting hurt. He pays. We leave him alone. He sleeps fine. Everybody wins." You nod. And the thing is, in the immediate frame, he's not wrong. The restaurant owner does sleep fine. The arrangement is stable. You aren't hurting anyone. You're just standing near a door while a man hands another man an envelope. You collect from 7 businesses in the first month. $800 here, $1,200 there, $500 from a dry cleaner who's been on the list since 1987. The total's around $6,400 across the route, of which you see $400, which is your cut as the lowest participant in the chain. $400 cash for a week of driving and door standing and envelope holding. You also have a job at your cousin's plumbing business for tax purposes, and your tax purposes pay you $320 a week on paper. And the IRS sees a young man making modest, honest wages, and the IRS is satisfied, which is the point. The first time a business owner doesn't pay, you learn something new. Carmine handles it. You are there. A Greek diner owner named Papadopoulos, who has been on the route for 3 years, tells Carmine he had a bad month, that the payment is going to be 2 weeks late. Carmine listens politely. He says he understands. He says 2 weeks is fine, and then before leaving, he picks up a glass sugar dispenser from the counter and sets it down the edge and lets it fall, and it shatters on the tile floor, and he says, "Careful, place is getting a little rundown." He smiles. Papadopoulos smiles. You smile. 2 weeks later, Papadopoulos pays. He pays the 2 weeks late plus an additional $400 that Carmine calls a consideration fee, and that Papadopoulos calls whatever helps him sleep. You understand now that the protection isn't theoretical. The thing that's being sold is the absence of what just happened. And the thing that just happened was a glass falling. You tell yourself it was just a glass. By the time you're 22, you've been arrested twice. Once for possession of an unlicensed firearm and once on a conspiracy charge that got reduced to a misdemeanor because the witness changed his statement, which happened after a specific conversation you were not present for and do not know the details of. You've done 60 days on the weapons charge. 60 days is not serious time in this world. It's almost a credential. You did it without telling anyone anything, which is the only thing that actually matters. And when you came out, Carmine told you that you'd done good, and a capo named Sal sent word that he'd noticed, and in this world being noticed by a capo is a form of compensation that has real value. Sal brings you into a different kind of work. The route continues, you still have your collections, but now you're also involved in the loan sharking operation that Sal runs out of a social club on the second floor of a building that officially belongs to a plumbing supply company. The logic of loan sharking is straightforward. People who can't get loans from banks need money, and you provide it at rates that would be illegal if the transaction were documented, which it isn't. The rate is called the VIG, short for vigorish, and it runs between 1 and 5% per week depending on the borrower's situation and negotiating position, which is usually poor. A man borrows $10,000 at 2% weekly. He owes $200 a week in interest before touching the principal. If he can only pay the interest, the principal never shrinks. Some borrowers have been paying interest for 4 years on loans they took out expecting to repay in 6 months. The math never worked in their favor. You knew this when you handed them the envelope. You rationalize it. They came to you. You didn't find them. They had a need and you had a resource, and the transaction was voluntary, which is technically true and morally insufficient, and you've decided not to spend too much time on the gap between those two things. What you spend time on is the operational management. Who is current? Who is late? Who needs a reminder? Who needs something more than a reminder? The reminder is usually a phone call. Something more than a reminder involves you showing up in person, and showing up in person has a spectrum of what it means, and you have learned to operate across that spectrum with a graduated precision that you're honestly a little proud of, in the way you're proud of any skill you've developed through repetition. The thing that keeps you from examining this too closely is the money. By 25, you're clearing $4,000 a week cash. You have a car that cost $48,000. You have an apartment that you pay for in cash 6 months at a time through a management company that asks no questions because the management company has its own relationship with Sal. You buy your mother a new refrigerator and a washing machine and pay her electric bill for a year. This is not nothing. This is, by the standard of the neighborhood you grew up in, an extraordinary level of provision. And provision feels like justification in a way that is very difficult to argue with at 7 in the morning when the bill is paid and the family is taken care of and everything seems fine. You're made at 27. The ceremony happens in a house in Staten Island with 7 other men and a capo and the boss's representative and a card table covered with a cloth and the gun and the knife and the image of the saint and the oath. Your finger is pricked and the blood falls on the card and the card burns, and you repeat words about how this family is now your family. And your family comes second to this family, and you will kill for this family and die for this family, and the secret of this family goes with you to your grave. The words are serious. The room is serious. The men around you have done serious things. You have done serious things. And when it's over, someone brings out a bottle of scotch that costs more than your first car, and everyone drinks and laughs, and it feels genuinely like belonging. What being made actually changes is specific and practical. You are now protected. No one in any family can harm you without permission from your capo and potentially from the administration. Depending on the situation, you can now sponsor associates. You have a seat at the table in disputes that involve your interests, which didn't exist before. You also now have obligations that didn't exist before. You kick up to your capo, which means a percentage of everything you earn goes up the chain. The percentage depends on your capo and your relationship with him. With Sal, it's 30%. You were expecting 25. You do not negotiate. You say fine and you absorb the 30% into your operational math, and you find ways to expand the operation to compensate, which was always the point. Growth is built into the structure. Stagnation is suspicious. The federal government has been building a case since 2019. You know this not because anyone told you directly, but because you've learned to read the environment the way the Secret Service agent learns to read a crowd, by noticing what doesn't fit. The car that parks on your block twice in a week with different plates but the same antenna configuration. The new guy at the social club who asks questions in a way that real connected people never ask questions because real connected people already know the answers or know not to ask. You say nothing to Sal about the new guy directly. You mention, at the right moment in the right vague language, that the club might benefit from being more careful about who it lets upstairs. Sal understands. The new guy stops coming around. Whether that means he was federal or just made the right people nervous, you never find out. Paranoia is not a dysfunction in this life. It's a professional requirement. You trust your wife because you have to trust someone, and she has proven herself over 8 years of knowing exactly what your life is and saying nothing to anyone. You trust Sal because Sal has been in this for 30 years and has more to lose than anyone from an exposure. You trust the 2 men in your crew who have been with you since before you were made. Everyone else you manage with a kind of structural friendliness that doesn't reach all the way to trust, because trust is a specific thing in this world, with a specific cost, and you budget it carefully. A man in your crew, not one of the 2, does something that creates a problem. The problem involves a victim who did not agree to be a victim, and a level of exposure that puts your operation at risk, and a set of facts that cannot be made to go away by having someone change their statement. You are not the one who decides what happens next. That decision goes up to Sal and comes back down as an instruction, and the instruction is clear, and you comply with it. And the problem goes away in a way that you now carry the weight of completely and will carry for the rest of your life. You knew this was a possible feature of this life before you lit the card. That is true. It does not help with the weight. By 34, you are running your own crew. 8 men, 6 of them made, 2 associates. You kick up to a new capo because Sal had a health problem that turned out to be a federal prison sentence, 12 years, of which he'll serve 9. You visited him once, in Otisville, and he looked smaller than you remember. What institutions do to men, shrink them below their operational size. He told you to keep your head down, keep the numbers moving, trust nobody you haven't known for 10 years. You said you would. You meant it. The life from the outside looks like what it looked like when you were 17 watching those men outside the social club. Unhurried, resourced, respected. The life from the inside is a continuous low-grade management of threat. From law enforcement, from rivals, from your own people doing things you didn't authorize, from the structural instability of an organization that has no legal recourse when someone cheats it and must therefore handle everything internally with methods that create their own exposure. The men who last in this life are not the toughest or the most violent. They are the most careful, the most patient, the most capable of holding multiple contradictory facts at the same time without needing them to resolve. You have a son who is 9 years old. He plays baseball on Saturdays, and you go when you can, which is most Saturdays, and you sit in the bleachers in a jacket that cost $800 and you watch him field grounders. And for 2 hours, every Saturday, something very simple is true. You're just his father. Nothing else is operating. Just that. He's going to grow up in the neighborhood. He's going to watch certain men with a specific attention that you recognize. He's going to understand the structure without being told, the way you understood it, the way fish understand water. You don't know yet what you'll tell him. You tell yourself you'll tell him something different from what you were told, which was nothing. But you also know that what you tell him matters less than what he sees. And what he sees is you. And what you are is not something you chose cleanly or built accidentally. You are the product of a sequence of decisions, each of which made sense in the moment it was made, each of which moved the floor slightly, until the floor was somewhere entirely different from where you started and you'd stopped noticing the distance. You are not a monster. That's the thing people need to understand who haven't been inside something like this. You love your son. You take care of your people. You are, by the ethical logic of the world you operate in, fair and reliable and occasionally generous. The harm that you cause is real, and you carry some of it and have stopped examining the rest because examining it doesn't change it and you have work to do. Somewhere tonight, a 17-year-old is watching men outside a social club. He's noticing the way they hold themselves, the way the neighborhood moves around them. He's asking himself very quietly whether he could be that. He already knows the answer. He just hasn't admitted it yet. That's the first truth. There are 9 more, and none of them are what you think. That's how it works.